Okay, hey guys. So unfortunately, I will not be able to join us on our weekly Zoom at Thursday. So what I'm going to do is just host the lecture now via Zoom, pre-recorded, obviously. And then at the end of this, you'll take your quiz, which will expire 15 minutes after the lecture ends. So it'll allow you a chance to go through it, and then it'll be a 15-minute window Thursday to take the quiz, just to see where you are on your learning. So what we're going to go over today is a topic near and dear to my heart, which is the deadlift. I'm still going through your lab videos for the squat. We're going to do the same assignment for the deadlift as well. Once again, does not matter what you have access to. You can use no implement, or you can use an implement such as a broomstick, rebar, PVC pipe, whatever you have access to, or nothing at all. Pencils, pens, etc. Don't overcomplicate it. It's just the joint actions. The big key, the big takeaway is being able to list off the joint actions, prime movers, and coaching cues, techniques, and common flaws. All right, the clever farmer, story of the day. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who entered his old mule in the Kentucky Derby. People were amused. One of his neighbors said, "You don't think that mule actually has a chance in the world to beat those thoroughbreds, do you?" The farmer said, "Of course not, but I think he'll profit from the association." If you want to become a better athlete, practice with and compete against athletes who are better than you. This is the whole premise to the term arrested development or delaying automaticity. You want to always compete up. There's another old saying, you are the sum of your 5 closest friends, financially, physically, emotionally, whatever you want to call it. So if you associate with people that are stronger than you, people that are more financially endowed than you are, chances are you'll start to take on some of those habits and behaviors that have got them there, and you will in fact start slowly absorbing those qualities. So profit from the association. It doesn't mean to use people, of course, but to learn from those who have, in a sense, have or do walk the walk. So back pain, that's the reason we deadlift. Seems counterintuitive. Approximately 31 million Americans have low back pain at any given point. This is from a study posted in 1994, so I'm sure we can update this. Low back pain is the single leading cause of disability worldwide. Single leading cause of disability worldwide. And it's commonly because we execute movements improperly that maintain a biomechanically efficient way to pick things up. Why is back pain such an issue? How can we limit back pain? I'll give it away. It's the deadlift. The definition is a biomechanically efficient method of lifting heavy objects off the floor. Why should everyone learn how to deadlift? Because we all pick things up off of the floor. The deadlift utilizes hip extension from a half squat position. So if we're talking about the concentric portion, the knees are extending, the hips are extending via the hamstrings, quads, isometric stabilization of the trunk, engagement of the trapezius, extension of the lats. The deadlift strengthens the hip extensor muscles, lower and upper back, spinal erectors, improves posture. These are all benefits. The actual joints, hip extension, prime mover, gluteus maximus, synergist muscles, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, adductor magnus, which is an assistant hip extensor. Knee extension is done through prime movers, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, and rectus femoris. Not done yet. Back and trunk isometric contraction. Prime movers are erector spinae group, latissimus dorsi, trapezius, rhomboid major, obliques, and abdominals. Humerus extension brought to you via the latissimus dorsi and posterior deltoid. So remember we talked a little bit about it in the push-up, how there was adduction and flexion of the humerus. This is the opposite. It's extension of the humerus because we're bringing the humerus back to the body. So that would be extension, and it's a contraction of the latissimus dorsi. Deadlifts are a full body exercise. Executing the deadlift, we stand with the shins 1 to 1.5 inches away from the bar, not feet, as we've heard previously in some previous semesters. 1 to 1.5 inches away from the bar. Feet should be shoulder width apart. Grab the bar just outside of your shins with an overhand grip. Bend your knees and drop your hips. Chest up, eyes looking at the ground, 12 to 15 feet away. We want to maintain a neutral spine. So if we look too high, chin is up. Once again, the chin up, chin high is not a good back squat cue. For the same reason, it's not a good deadlift cue. We don't want our chin in the air. We want our spine neutral. arms straight. We don't bend our elbows. A lot of people, when they're learning the deadlift, especially if the bar is too light, they'll have a tendency of bending their elbows. We do not want that to happen. Take a big breath using the Valsalva maneuver. Drop your hips, shift your weight towards your heels, and pull. Not only on your heels, but towards your heels and pull. What that's doing is trying to use your counterbalance from the weight of the bar. So we're trying to lean back against the bar using our body weight to help break to help counter the weight that is on the bar. So as long as the bar is heavier than us, we should not fall. If the weight is a little bit lighter, then we want to shift back just a little bit less. Keep lower and upper back tight, under control, low to the ground. We don't just drop it. We'll talk about a tragic happening with Eddie Hall dropping a world record and it not counting. Coaching cues, do they work for everyone? They should be individualized. The ones mentioned previously are a good starting point, but the ones mentioned previously are a good starting point for a beginner, but as a coach, you should constantly be perfecting your craft and understanding your clients a little bit better. So we went into great detail about this over the squat. Coaching cues are not just a fix-it Band-Aid. We must communicate. We must meet our clients where they're at and communicate with them what we are trying to accomplish through their positioning, posture, and biomechanics. Breaking down the pull. So we take a deep breath. This is going to be done either at the top or the bottom, depending on where the client is comfortable at. If you're a little bit more efficient in your setup, taking a breath at the top will probably be a little bit better because you can get more pressure inside of the intrathoracic area. However, if it takes you a little while to set up, it may be better just to get into your setup and then take a deep breath at the bottom. Get your weight back off of your toes, so that's that leaning back a little bit. Back angle should change for the first, angle should not change for the first few inches off the ground, which means that if this is our hips here and this is our spine, then our hips and knees are rising together as our chest is, so our hips and knees can simultaneously lock out. Elsewise, the hips shoot up too fast, then the back rounds. We're not looking for that. So the back angle should not change for the first few inches off the ground. This is done by keeping the back tight. So we want to engage the lats and keep the bar close to us and keep our chest out. We want to lead with the chest or have a superhero chest are all common cues for that. Don't attempt to make your back angle too vertical before pulling. There's a common flaw. People like to be extremely vertical. It's only possible for certain lever length people. You need to have basically short tibias and longer tibias, medium tibias, and short femurs. Either way, you need short legs just to get into that position. Typically, it's going to be the femur because that's the distance from the hips. The working muscles of the hips to the bar is going to be hip and knee. So the shorter that is, the more parallel they can sit with a perpendicular trunk. If I had a dry erase board, I could easily explain this a little bit better. Knee and hip should extend simultaneously. One of the common flaws you'll see is, once again, if this is the head and this is the hips, you'll see the hips shoot up before everything else starts to move. And that's typically a little bit too weak of a back, or it could just be a learning issue with neurologically recruiting the specific muscles. At the top, just lift your chest. So that's that superhero chest or leaning with the chest, but don't lean back. So when we have the bar, position here, when we have the bar locked out, that's finished movement. That's hyperextension of the lumbar, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that we're maintaining a good position and not hyperextending at the bottom or the top. Breathing during the deadlift, we're going to use the Valsalva. We're going to use the Valsalva maneuver, which once again takes a big breath at the top, holds it throughout the range of motion. Exhale 3/4 of the way up or through the sticking point. So that's going to kind of vary individual to individual. So executing the Valsalva maneuver is forcefully trying to exhale against the closed epiglottis, creating a fluid ball or intrathoracic pressure, causing the pressure inside of the stomach around the visceral organs to tighten and creating an airbag-like effect for the spine. Breathing will change depending on whether you are doing one repetition or multiple repetitions. Typically, and again, this is also the age or experience of the lifter as well, because if you're able to get into a good position quickly, then you are going to be better suited with taking the breath at the top. If you're a little unfamiliar with getting into proper position, then take the breath at the bottom. However, if you're doing multiple reps, it could change your breathing pattern as well. So 1 rep deep breath before you begin the pull, and hold the breath through the eccentric and concentric phases. Sorry, the entire concentric and eccentric phase. Multiple reps. We're going to take a deep breath before we begin the pull, breathe out at the top, take another breath at the top, and then hold it throughout the eccentric phase. The constant in these two variables are that we are bracing both under the concentric and eccentric portion of the exercise. Deadlift cues, once again, bar over the midfoot, shins to the bar after you set your grip. I want to make this clear that we're not scraping our shins, but they do make contact initially. As you get more experience, you'll be able to maintain extremely close proximity between the bar and the shin without actually scraping the shin. And that's just comes with age. So you shouldn't be walking around with bloody shins, no matter what we've heard on Instagram or through other non-vetted resources. Chest up, arms straight, back tight, keep the bar close. These are all very common deadlift cues that have stood the test of time, but once again, just because it works for the majority doesn't mean it will work for the entirety. Deadlift checklist, the 3 angles that we're looking at are hip angle, back angle, and knee angle, and that's going to vary between the lifter during the lifter's build. While we were going through our squat lecture, there was a diagram of a person doing a front squat, a high bar squat versus a low bar squat, and it showed the different knee angles and hip angles. This is kind of the same idea. The length of the tibias and the length of the femurs and the length of the torso will all dictate these angles, but we want to make sure that the setup is consistent each and every time and efficient. So if our knee angle is too open and our hips are too high and our hip angle is too closed, then that means a lot of pressure is going to be on our back, because we're basically going to be perpendicular to the floor. So we want to get into the most advantageous position for our build before initiating the pull. The body position, shoulders should be above the hips should be above the knees, and the chest should be over the bar. So we're trying to get the shoulders back behind the bar. Slightly in front, not completely over. Bar path should be a straight line. So this is a good position. Now, if the lifter had longer femurs, as I was talking about, they would extend up like this, and then the hips would be higher. And the shorter the torso, the worse this problem would be. If the tibias were shorter, and the hips were shorter, then the lifter would be able to get a lot lower before starting the pull and turning it into more of a quad exercise and much less of a back exercise. So we talked about torque a little bit on the squat lecture as well. So towards the top, we have compressive forces, muscle force, compression on the lower lumbar, and shear on the lower lumbar as well. So we have two types of torque on the lower back, and there is common injury with this exercise, but when done appropriately and over time and progress smartly, then they will actually make us a little bit more resilient to injury. Deadlift variations, we have traditional, sumo, snatch, trap bar, and we're really limited to your imagination. So you can do bands and chains, you can do deficit, you can do rack, pulls, etc., different bars. Recently with a client used the tsunami bar, which is a really, really whippy piece of like high tensile PVC to give her a greater bend of the bar and test her stability. But it's really limited to our own imaginations as long as we have a specific purpose behind what we are doing. Gripping the bar, double overhand grip, alternating grip, hook grip, straps okay, suits okay. It all depends on your training goals. So there's a lot of jovial smack talk about strongmen using straps, powerlifters using suits, this and that. At the end of the day, we have to focus on our training goal. So is the double overhand grip the most preferred? For general fitness, probably. If you're trying to get a little bit stronger of a deadlift and your grip is limiting your deadlift, then an alternate grip is not the worst thing in the world, or improper form. Alternating grip does have a higher tendency of creating bicep tears, because now one bicep is loaded, and that's going to be the hand that's supinated. Hook grip, if your hands are big enough and you can reach it, sure. It's painful at first, but as you get used to it, it subsides the pain. Straps okay, depends on your training goal. Typically I use straps because when I'm deadlifting, I'm trying to get the biggest number, not see the biggest number that I can grip in my hands. And again, it depends on your training goal. Side note, my biggest deadlift is without straps. Deadlift progressions. Kettlebell deadlift or trap bar deadlift, this allows the lifter to get into a good position, and it greatly reduces the torque on the lower back, because instead of having the bar, so we'll say this is the knees, instead of having the bar in front of the legs due to the length of the femur, we can actually bring the resistance back into the straighter line of pull, so we're decreasing the mechanical disadvantage or the strain on the lower back. From there, kettlebell and trap bar both do that. We go to empty bar deadlift, as long as they can get into a good position. If they're still struggling, an elevated deadlift is actually going to be preferred. I would probably switch those around, so you can argue either way on that. Conventional deadlift, and then finally deficit deadlift. With the deficit deadlift, just because someone is progressing doesn't mean they ever have to do a deficit deadlift. It's typically reserved for people who just need some kind of different training stimulus, powerlifters and strongmen, because it is a competitive event for strongmen, and powerlifters because one of the most infamous powerlifting gyms in the world say they do them, so everyone does them. Just make sure that they're either indicated or at least not contraindicated. Elevated deadlift using bumper plates or boxes, plyometric boxes, or out of the rack for a rack pull, any of those of the sort. Common flaws are the same as the deadlift. Deadlift flaws and corrections: not keeping the upper back and lower back tight, so you have the scared cat back; not keeping the arm straight, bending the elbow, loading the bicep tendon; starting with the bar not over the midfoot, too far forward or against the shins and scraping; allowing bar to get in front of them, so we're not keeping the lats tight and the chest up; not dropping the hips and only using the lower back; too high of a hip angle, or too small of a hip angle and too open of a knee angle; dropping the bar once the rep is finished. Eddie Hall's first world record denied due to that. So attached here is a research article about the different muscle activation between sumo versus conventional. Feel free to check it out. It was something I just added because I was curious. Don't worry about your review or homework. Your homework is going to be submitting a deadlift video using the biomechanical breakdown, explain the joint angles, prime movers, common flaws, techniques, and setup, as well as demonstration, and taking the quiz. Those are going to be your homework, and it's just a reference page. All right, email me with any questions you have. Good luck, and I will see you next week.